President announced at 7 p.m. today the unconditional and unqualified surrender of the Japanese. General Douglas MacArthur takes over as the Allied Supreme Commander and the man who will tell Emperor Hirohito just how to run Japan.
Frank Cosby, born July 4th, 1925, Jefferson City, Missouri. Frank served in the 73rd Air Division, which was under the 21st Bomber Wing, stationed at the time in Saipan, a small island in the Mariana Island chain. Frank's aircraft, a Boeing B-29 Superfortress bomber, nicknamed the Special Delivery, was one of many stationed on the island, and would be involved in many important missions in the Pacific Theater. Frank, who was too young to join the Army when the war started, was drawn into the civilian pilot training program, which taught young men how to fly planes in the goal of drafting them as pilots. As soon as he was old enough, he enlisted in the Army as a pilot and started his basic training. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress was a huge technological advancement over the Japanese for the United States Army Air Force. It was a long-range bomber unlike any other of its type at the time. The B-29 boasted 4 large 2,200 horsepower engines, the largest of any aircraft at the time, as well as the ability to carry up to 10 tons of bombs, 4 more tons than its predecessor, the B-17. It was also faster, at a top speed of 357 miles per hour, 55 miles per hour over the top speed of the B-17. Finally, its enormous range of 3,800 miles closed the gap needed to bomb inland Japan, and allowed the bombers to safely return home after the mission was completed. By far the most important of the missions he took part in, Frank, along with numerous other bombers of the 21st Bomber Wing, flew out for Japan from Saipan several times on missions to destroy or cripple the Japanese industry, using a deadly conventional bomb known as a firebomb. These bombs were unlike normal explosives because they started a large fire where they hit, like napalm. This was especially dangerous to Japanese cities, as they still had many structures made of flammable materials like wood. The Fire Battle of Tokyo on March 10, 1944, was the largest of the firebombing missions that Frank took part in. The bombing and the fires that started because of it killed over 80,000 civilians and wounded another 40,000. An estimated 51% of the city was destroyed during the many bombings that took place during the mission. It was one of the single most destructive strategic bombing missions conducted by the United States Army Air Force on Japan, crippling both the civilian population and the industry of Tokyo. After Frank had completed several bombing runs on Japanese cities, he learned that his next mission was to be on a small island in the Pacific, very close to mainland Japan, named Iwo Jima. This island was of great importance to the U.S. Army, as it would be a base of operations, as well as an airfield if a mainland invasion of Japan was to take place. Frank's objective was to fly in before the amphibious assault and destroy the defenses of the Japanese who were entrenched there. Frank was a part of many of these missions, but later learned that the preliminary bombing failed to destroy the defenses, which led to a very costly victory for the U.S. land forces. One American POW on the island at the time of the bombing said that as many as 40% of the bombs missed their target altogether, which may have in part been due to the large defenses placed by the Japanese. The living conditions during Frank's stay at Saipan were much worse than expected. Problems with transporting supplies from more developed bases led to a lack of rations, and the lack of clean drinking water caused many soldiers and pilots to fall ill. On top of this, the weather conditions were completely different from Frank's home of Missouri, and the incessant rain drove many of his fellow pilots mad. As well as environmental dangers, the island of Saipan was still open to Japanese attack, and on several occasions, Japanese bombers and fighters launched missions against Saipan, destroying many planes and ruining the airfield. During Frank Cosby's career as a pilot in the United States Army Air Force, he took part in numerous missions which were of vital importance to the war effort. Through his firebombing of Japanese cities, Frank destroyed the Japanese industry and crippled the civilian population during the war, which directly led to a lack of supplies as well as a lack of manpower. Frank also helped secure an important victory on Iwo Jima by performing preliminary bombing runs, which, however inaccurate, were still helpful to the ground forces. These missions single-handedly helped allow a United States victory in the Pacific, which was so desperately needed by the American people at the time. Also, the Japanese industry remained crippled after the war for quite some time, eliminating any chance of a Japanese threat recurring and allowing the U.S. to focus on the Cold War and the USSR.